My wife. She's just a housewife. Doesn't understand business. My husband said it to a circle of executives while I stood 20 feet away, champagne in hand, watching him perform the role of successful businessman with a supportive, simple wife at home. His colleagues chuckled politely, glancing at me with the dismissive pity reserved for women they considered decorative but irrelevant. What none of them knew, what my husband was about to discover in the most public way possible, was that the housewife he'd been diminishing for 12 years had been quietly building something that would reshape the power dynamics of our entire marriage. Before I tell you what happened when that glass shattered on the floor, comment where you're watching from, and ask yourself honestly, if your spouse had spent over a decade underestimating you, how would you want them to find out the truth? My name is Evelyn Hartley. I'm 42 years old, and I spent 12 years being invisible in my own home before I decided to become unforgettable. I met my husband Jonathan during my junior year at Stanford. He was in the MBA program. I was finishing my degree in economics. We connected over late-night study sessions and shared ambition. In those early days we were equals. We talked about building something together. He'd run companies. I'd manage investments. Power couple, he called us. Then I got pregnant. Our daughter Isabel arrived 6 months after my graduation. Jonathan had just landed his first executive position at a tech startup. The math was simple, he said. His salary was higher. His trajectory was clearer. Someone needed to stay home with the baby. That someone was me. It's just temporary, he promised. Once things stabilize, you can get back into finance. Maybe in a year or two. A year became 2. 2 became 5. Isabel started school, but by then, Jonathan had been promoted 3 times and our lifestyle had expanded accordingly. The house in Palo Alto, the private school tuition, the vacation home in Tahoe. We don't really need your income, he said when I mentioned going back to work. And the kids benefit from having you home. Kids plural. Our son Marcus had arrived when Isabel was 4. So I stayed. I told myself it was my choice. But somewhere along the way, my identity had been whittled down to 2 words, Jonathan's wife. He didn't do it cruelly. Not at first. But the dismissals accumulated like sediment over years. Evelyn wouldn't understand, it's technical stuff. Said at dinner parties. She handles the domestic side, I handle the business side. Said to colleagues. She's happy at home. Not everyone needs a career to feel fulfilled. Said to friends about me while I stood right there. The man who'd once treated me as an equal now treated me as furniture. Necessary present, but not particularly interesting. And for years I accepted it. I told myself that being a good mother was enough. That Jonathan's success was our success. That the life we'd built was worth the identity I'd surrendered. Then came the inheritance. My grandmother Lillian Chun passed away when I was 36. We'd been close when I was young, but distance and my increasingly consuming domestic life had kept us apart in her final years. I'd always felt guilty about that. The will was a shock. Grandmother Lillian, it turned out, had been significantly wealthier than anyone realized. Her husband, my grandfather, had been an early investor in several Silicon Valley companies back in the 1970s. The portfolio had grown quietly for decades, managed by a small family office that operated without fanfare. She left me $47 million. $47 million. The number didn't feel real. Jonathan was traveling when the lawyer called. I sat in my kitchen, listening to figures that sounded like fantasy, and made a decision that would change everything. I didn't tell him. The lawyer helped me establish the funds and accounts Jonathan didn't know about, managed by a firm he had no connection to. I told him my grandmother had left me a small inheritance, some jewelry and about $200,000, which I deposited into our joint account to maintain the illusion. The rest stayed hidden. Waiting. What are you going to do with it? The lawyer had asked. Learn, I said. And then invest. I spent the next 6 years getting an education Jonathan never knew about. I hired a financial advisor who reported only to me. I took online courses in investment management. I read voraciously books about venture capital, private equity, market analysis. Everything I'd learned at Stanford came flooding back, sharper now, honed by years of observing the business world through Jonathan's career. I started making small investments. Tech startups. biotech firms, real estate developments. Some failed. Most succeeded. The $47 million grew to $60 million, then $80 million, then more. I did all of this while packing lunches, attending PDA meetings, and hosting dinner parties for Jonathan's colleagues. The perfect housewife by day, secret investor by night. Nobody suspected, least of all my husband. The opportunity came 3 years ago. Jonathan's company, Vertex Dynamics, was struggling. They'd expanded too quickly, taken on too much debt, and their primary product line was facing stiff competition. The board was considering options, including seeking outside investment or selling. I followed the situation through public filings and discreet inquiries. And when the moment was right, I made my move. Through a holding company called Meridian Capital Partners, I approached Vertex's board with an investment offer. $35 million for a 52% stake in the company, enough to become the majority shareholder and gain effective control. The board was desperate. They didn't ask many questions about who was behind Meridian Capital. They just saw the money and grabbed it. The deal closed in 60 days. I became the anonymous majority investor in my husband's company, and he had no idea he now worked for his wife. For 3 years I watched. I attended board meetings through my representative, a lawyer named David Chun who served as the face of Meridian Capital. I made decisions about company direction, executive compensation, strategic initiatives, all through channels Jonathan never connected to me. When he complained at dinner about the anonymous investor's demands, I nodded sympathetically and poured him more wine. When he ranted about board meetings where Meridian's people pushed back on his initiatives, I suggested he try to find common ground. When he mentioned that some executives suspected the investor might be a woman based on certain decision-making patterns, I laughed and said that was probably just stereotyping. I was hiding in plain sight, and it was intoxicating, but I wasn't doing it for power alone. I was waiting for the right moment. The company Gala was held every December. This year's event was at the Ritz-Carlton in San Francisco, a celebration of Vertex's successful turnaround, the turnaround I'd funded and guided from the shadows. Jonathan was expected to give a speech thanking the executive team and acknowledging the partnership with Meridian Capital. What he didn't know was that the board had other plans. David Chun had informed them at my instruction that Meridian's principal investor wanted to step out of anonymity, that this gala would be the venue for the reveal. The board was thrilled. They loved the drama of it. Great publicity, they said. Jonathan was not consulted. I dressed carefully that evening. Not the understated elegance he expected from me, but something sharper. A designer gown I'd bought with money he didn't know I had. Jewelry that had belonged to my grandmother. I looked like what I was, a woman with power. Jonathan barely noticed. "You look nice," he said absently while checking his phone in the limo. "Try not to bore anyone with kitchen renovation stories, okay? These are important people." I smiled. "I'll do my best." The gala was packed. Tech executives, venture capitalists, industry journalists. I recognized many faces from the research I'd done over years of quiet preparation. Jonathan worked the room like always, shaking hands, laughing at jokes, performing the role of successful CEO. I drifted behind him, the decorative wife nobody paid attention to, until I heard him say it. He was speaking to a group that included 2 board members and several VPs from partner companies. I was close enough to hear but far enough to seem uninvolved. "Your wife came tonight?" someone asked. "She seems lovely." Jonathan chuckled. "My wife? She's just a housewife. Doesn't understand business. But she likes getting dressed up for these things, so I humor her." The group laughed politely. The board members exchanged a glance I couldn't read. I felt something crystallize inside me. Not anger exactly. More like clarity. 12 years of being diminished. 12 years of being reduced. And in this room full of people he was trying to impress, he'd done it again. The board chairman, William Torres, took the stage 20 minutes later. "Good evening, everyone. Before we continue with the celebrations, we have a special announcement." The room quieted. Jonathan, standing near the stage with a fresh drink, looked curious but unworried. As many of you know, Vertex Dynamics was saved 3 years ago by a significant investment from Meridian Capital Partners. That investment and the strategic guidance that came with it has been instrumental in our turnaround. Applause rippled through the crowd. Tonight, we're honored to finally reveal the identity of Meridian's principal investor. The person who believed in this company when others didn't. The person whose vision has shaped our recovery. Jonathan's smile was fixed, politely interested. He had no idea what was coming. Mrs. Evelyn Hartley, please stand. The silence that followed was absolute. I rose from my seat near the back of the room, my heart pounding but my face composed. Jonathan turned toward me. His glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Evelyn is the majority shareholder of Vertex Dynamics, William continued. Through Meridian Capital, she has been the driving force behind our strategic decisions for the past 3 years. We're proud to finally acknowledge her leadership publicly. The applause that erupted was overwhelming, but I barely heard it. I was watching my husband. His face cycled through emotions faster than I'd ever seen. Confusion, disbelief, recognition, horror. I walked toward the stage, passing him without stopping. Thank you, William, I said into the microphone, my voice steady. And thank you to the Vertex team for your hard work and dedication. I looked out at the crowd, at the executives who dismissed me hours ago, at the board members who'd been reporting to me for 3 years, at my husband, still frozen near the shattered glass. Some of you know me as Jonathan Hartley's wife, and I am proud to be his partner in life. But I am also a Stanford economics graduate, a trained investor, and now the majority owner of this company. I smiled. I've been called just a housewife more times than I can count. But housewives pay attention. We notice details others miss. We manage complex systems with no recognition. We build things quietly without fanfare. I paused. And sometimes we build things that surprise everyone, including the people who should have known us best. The applause that followed was thunderous. Jonathan didn't clap. We didn't speak until we were in the car. The ride home was silent for the first 20 minutes. I watched the city lights pass, calm despite the adrenaline still humming through my veins. Finally, Jonathan spoke. How long? 6 years of building the investment portfolio. 3 years owning the company. And you never told me. His voice was flat, controlled. You never asked. You were too busy explaining to everyone that I didn't understand business. He was quiet again. That money, your grandmother's inheritance. You said it was $200,000. I said it was a small inheritance. You assumed the number. You always assumed everything about me. So this is what, revenge? Punishment for not appreciating you enough. I turned to face him. This isn't revenge, Jonathan. If I wanted revenge, I would have fired you. I had the power. The board would have supported it. He flinched. This is about identity. About spending 12 years being reduced to just a housewife by the person who promised to be my partner. About building something meaningful while you dismissed everything I did as irrelevant. I never meant to hurt you. Intent doesn't change impact. Every time you called me just a housewife, you were telling me I was less than. Tonight I showed you and everyone else that I was always more. The car pulled into our driveway. The house I'd maintained for 12 years. The life I'd built in the margins of his career. What happens now? Jonathan asked quietly. That's up to you. I'm not going anywhere. But things are going to be different. I'm not invisible anymore, Jonathan. And I won't pretend to be. We sat in the dark car for a long moment. I didn't know, he finally said. I didn't know you were capable of this. That's the point. You should have known. You should have seen me all along. The months that followed were complicated. Marriage counseling, difficult conversations, a complete restructuring of how we related to each other. Jonathan stayed at Vertex, but our dynamic had fundamentally changed. He couldn't unsee what he'd seen. He couldn't unknow what he now knew. I stepped into a more active role at the company, eventually taking a board seat. The housewife became a regular presence in meetings, strategy sessions, executive decisions. Our children learned something too. Isabel, now 16, told me the Gala story had gone viral at her school. My mom is a legend, she said proudly. Marcus, 12, asked if I could teach him about investing. We started having lessons on Saturday mornings. Jonathan and I are still married. Still working through years of imbalance. Some days are better than others. But the fundamental power dynamic has shifted, and we both know it. I don't need his validation anymore. I never really did. I just needed to stop hiding my own light to make his shine brighter. If you're watching this and you've ever been dismissed, underestimated, or reduced to a single role, I want you to know something. What they see is not all you are. Build quietly if you need to. Grow in spaces they're not watching. Become something so undeniable that when the truth finally emerges, it reshapes everything they thought they knew. My husband said I was just a housewife. Now he works for me. If this story hit home, share yours in the comments. And subscribe because the next story might be exactly what you needed to hear.